Okay, so forget everything you think you know about a big financial crime. Seriously, this is not some Wall Street story, and it's not a super complex cyber attack. This is the story of how one person built a literal factory, a factory that made only one thing: fake tax refunds. And they did it by stealing millions of dollars from the inside out. And when I say millions, I'm not kidding. Over $2.3 million. Just gone. Vanished right out of the US Treasury. But here's the real kicker. The IRS was never hacked. Not a single firewall was breached. No secret servers were compromised. The system itself, well, that became the weapon. So how on earth is that even possible? Right away, your mind probably jumps to the usual suspects, some shadowy group of hackers on the dark web, or maybe one of those lone wolf genius programmers hiding behind a wall of code. That's definitely what you'd think at first. Nope, it wasn't any of those things. The breach came from someone the government explicitly trusted, a licensed, credentialed professional who had basically been handed the keys to the kingdom. And that's what makes this whole story so chilling. So our story really kicks off in early 2020. You've got millions of tax returns getting filed, pretty standard stuff. But deep inside the IRS, analysts start to notice something, well, something weird. A huge flood of high-dollar refunds, all coming from this one tiny tax office in Bakersfield, California. To really get how this all went down, you have to understand the two main players. See, this wasn't a solo act, it was a partnership. You had one guy who was the architect, he designed the whole fraud. And then you had the other guy who was the key, the one who could unlock the door to the treasury. And this is where it gets really interesting how they split the work. On one side, you've got Miguel Martinez, the architect. He's the mastermind, right? Stealing social security numbers, inventing fake companies out of thin air. Then you've got Victor Cruz, the key. He's the legitimate licensed tax preparer, the guy with all the official credentials. So Martinez could build these perfect fraudulent returns, but only Cruz could actually give them that official stamp of approval and hit submit. And the whole thing hinges on this little acronym, PTIN. It's a Preparer Tax Identification Number. Think of it like a golden key, an official ID that the IRS gives to pros. When a return is filed with a PTIN, it gets processed faster, it raises fewer red flags. Martinez could be the best fraudster in the world, but he could never get a PTIN on his own. Cruz had one, and that made him absolutely essential to the whole scheme. So how did they actually pull it off? This wasn't just random. It was a machine, a step-by-step process, like a literal assembly line for pumping out fake refunds. Okay, so here's how the factory worked. Step 1. Martinez gets his hands on a bunch of stolen identities. Step 2, he just makes up companies, businesses that only exist on a piece of paper. Step 3, he prints out phony W-2 forms, making it look like these stolen identities worked at his fake companies and paid a ton in taxes. And then, the final, most important step, he hands the whole package to Cruz, who uses his magic key, his PTN, to file the return. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a lucky break, it was a machine. And every single part was designed to do one thing: fool the IRS's automated systems into spitting out a check before any human had a chance to realize it was all a lie. Now, the scheme started pretty small in late 2019, but then something happened that gave them the perfect cover to go big. The COVID-19 pandemic. A global crisis became their multi-million-dollar opportunity. You can see it all right here on this timeline. The fraud starts as just a little trickle. Then bam, the pandemic hits, and the IRS is just completely swamped. All of a sudden, their little scam becomes a massive flood. They knew the system was distracted, and man, they took full advantage. I mean, just try to imagine what the IRS was dealing with. They're trying to send out millions of stimulus checks, roll out new tax credits, and they're doing it all with their own offices shut down, facing these massive backlogs. But the crucial part, those employer wage reports, the very things they used to check if a W-2 is real, were all delayed. It was the perfect storm. Martinez and Cruz's fake forms just slipped right through the cracks in all that chaos. But here's the thing. Even in total chaos, a crime this big, this repetitive, it can't stay hidden forever. The sheer size of the fraud is actually what gave them away. It started creating patterns in the data that were just too loud to ignore. So how did this whole factory finally come crashing down? Well, it wasn't one single slip-up. It was the repetition. The same scam over and over and over again. IRS analysts finally started to connect the dots. They're looking at the data and asking, wait a minute, why is this one guy, Victor Cruz, filing over 500 returns, all with these massive refunds? And why do none of these clients seem to have ever filed taxes before? And why are all these brand new companies claiming they withheld all this tax money, but there's no record they ever actually, paid it to the government? The picture was getting very, very clear. And that's really the big lesson for any criminal, isn't it? You can build a pretty sophisticated machine, but the bigger it gets, the more noise it makes, the more fingerprints it leaves behind. Investigators just followed the digital trail, and it led them right to Martinez and Cruz. So the arrests happen. Both guys plead guilty. But the end of the court case brings up a much bigger and frankly more disturbing question about the system itself. This was never really just about the money. It was about a fundamental betrayal of trust. The prison sentences really reflected their roles in the whole thing. Martinez, the architect, the guy who engineered the fraud, he got 6 years in federal prison. And Cruz, the enabler, the guy who just provided the key, he got 18 months. The court saw him as the doorway, but Martinez was the guy who built the entire crooked house. And on top of that prison time, they were ordered to pay every single cent back, more than $2.3 million in restitution, a pretty staggering bill for their little factory. This quote from the source material, it just gets right to the heart of the matter. Victor Cruz didn't have to kick down the door to the IRS. As a licensed professional, the government literally held it open for him, trusting that he would do the right thing. He didn't. And that brings us to the real takeaway from this whole mess. We spend so much energy worrying about these super sophisticated hackers and shadowy dark web groups. But this case proves that the real vulnerability can be much, much simpler. It's not a failure of technology. It's a failure of trust. The biggest threat wasn't a bug in the code. It was a corrupt person the system was designed to depend on. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. Our entire financial system is built on trusting licensed professionals, the gatekeepers. But what happens when the gatekeeper is the one unlocking the door for the thieves? That is the vulnerability this case lays bare. And it's a problem that you just can't fix with a software patch.